In the glittering heart of 1920s, London, a star pianist, Clara Beaumont, collapses dead at her piano, her final note silenced by a cunning poison. Hercule Poirot, with his razor-sharp mind, unravels a web of envy, greed, and obsession. A jealous rival, a desperate manager, and a fan consumed by devotion all have secrets, but only one has blood on their hands. As clues unfold through a hidden diary and a fatal glass of water, Poirot reveals the killer in a dramatic showdown, proving that even in silence, the truth plays its own melody. Dive into The Silent Pianist, where every note hides a motive, and justice strikes the final chord. Chapter 1. The Silent Recital. The evening air in London carried a crisp bite, and the grand edifice of St. Cecilia's Concert Hall stood resplendent under the glow of gaslights, its marble facade gleaming like a beacon of culture. Within its hallowed walls, anticipation thrummed through the gathering crowd, their murmurs a soft prelude to the night's performance. Hercule Poirot, seated in a private box draped in crimson velvet, adjusted his immaculate bow tie and surveyed the auditorium with keen, appraising eyes. His presence was a rare indulgence, prompted by an invitation from his old friend, Sir Henry Ashford, a patron of the arts with a penchant for lavish gestures. Tonight, the stage belonged to Madame Clara Beaumont, a pianist whose name had become synonymous with divine precision, her fingers weaving magic through Beethoven and Chopin alike. Poirot, ever the observer, noted the elegance of the audience. Ladies in shimmering gowns, gentlemen in tails, their faces alight with expectation. Sir Henry, a robust man with a florid complexion, leaned toward Poirot, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Clara Beaumont is a marvel, Poirot. Her Moonlight Sonata will stir your soul. Mark my words." Poirot's moustache twitched in a polite smile. "The soul, it is stirred by order and harmony, mon ami. I shall listen with great attention." The lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the hall, as delicate as the pause before a symphony's first note. The heavy curtains parted, revealing the grand piano, its ebony surface gleaming under the spotlight. Madame Clara, a vision in a sapphire gown, glided to her seat with the grace of a dancer. Her auburn hair was swept into an elegant chignon, and her hands, poised above the keys, seemed to promise a night of transcendence. Yet, as the audience held its breath, no music came. Clara's hands remained still, her posture rigid, her head slightly tilted as if listening to a distant melody. A murmur rippled through the crowd, soft at first, then urgent. A stagehand, a wiry youth in black, darted from the wings, his face paling as he reached the pianist. He touched her shoulder, then recoiled, his cry sharp enough to pierce the silence. She's not moving." The audience gasped, and Poirot's grey cells, those meticulous instruments of deduction, sprang to life. He rose, his small frame radiating authority, and descended the plush staircase to the stage, his patent leather shoes clicking with purpose. Inspector Japp, summoned by Sir Henry's swift telephone call, arrived with his usual bustle, his round face flushed with the importance of the moment. Uniformed officers cordoned off the stage as Poirot knelt beside Clara. Her eyes, wide and unseeing, stared at the ivory keys, and her lips bore the faintest trace of a smile, as if she had glimpsed something beyond the mortal veil. No blood stained her gown, no mark marred her skin. Yet death had claimed her, as surely as a crescendo claims silence. Japp, mopping his brow, muttered, "Looks like a heart attack, Poirot." "Poor woman. struck down in her prime. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a hawk's, lingered on a crystal glass of water resting on a small table beside the piano. The liquid, half consumed, shimmered faintly, its surface disturbed by a tremor too subtle for untrained eyes. "Non, mon ami," Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. "This is no caprice of nature. Madame Clara was murdered." He straightened, his gaze sweeping the scene, the piano, the glass, the untouched sheet music. The stagehand, still trembling, confirmed that Clara had sipped the water moments before taking her seat. Poirot's fingers brushed the glass, noting its chill, as if it had been freshly poured. "The method, it is elegant," he murmured to himself. "The motive, we shall discover." To Japp, he added, "We must secure this glass, Inspector. It holds the key to our mystery." As the audience was ushered out, their whispers now a cacophony of shock, Poirot's mind began its meticulous dance. Clara Beaumont, at the height of her fame, had enemies, perhaps hidden among her admirers. The absence of visible wounds pointed to poison, a weapon of cunning and intimacy. Who, then, had stood close enough to deliver death in a glass? The rival, envious of her brilliance? The manager, tethered to her success? Or the fan, whose devotion might mask a darker obsession? Poirot's moustache curved slightly, a sign of his resolve. "The silent recital," he said to Japp. "It has begun, and Hercule Poirot shall play its final note." Chapter 2. The Trio of Suspects. The morning after Madame Clara Beaumont's untimely demise, the fog draped London in a sombre shroud, as if the city itself mourned the loss of its musical luminary. Hercule Poirot, ensconced in his impeccably ordered apartment at Whitehaven Mansions, sat at his polished mahogany desk, his breakfast of hot chocolate and a single brioche untouched. His small, fastidious hands adjusted the alignment of a silver teaspoon, his mind already orchestrating the symphony of clues from St. Cecilia's concert hall. The glass of water, the absence of visible wounds, the frozen elegance of Clara's final pose, these were the notes of a composition he must decipher. Murder, he knew, was a performance requiring both motive and opportunity, and he intended to unmask the conductor. Captain Arthur Hastings, Poirot's loyal if somewhat plodding companion, arrived promptly at 9, his overcoat damp from the mist. "Dreadful business, Poirot," he said, shaking his head as he hung his hat. "Clara Beaumont, dead at her piano. The papers are calling it a tragedy, but you say murder. What makes you so certain?" Poirot's eyes, sharp as polished agates, met Hastings' gaze. "Mon cher Hastings, the heart does not conspire to stop at the precise moment a performance begins. The glass of water, it was disturbed, a ripple where none should be. And Madame Clara, she was too vibrant, too precise, to succumb without a cause. Non, this is the work of a human hand, and Hercule Poirot shall find it." The task at hand was to interrogate the 3 individuals closest to Clara's final moments, each a potential player in this grim recital. Inspector Japp, ever pragmatic, had arranged for them to meet Poirot at the concert hall's administrative office, a wood-panelled room adorned with the portraits of musical luminaries. The air carried the faint scent of polish and old paper, a fitting stage for unravelling secrets. Poirot, in his immaculate black suit, stood by a tall window overlooking the Thames, his silhouette a study in precision against the grey morning light. The first to arrive was Mademoiselle Elise Varnier, a pianist whose star had dimmed as Clara's ascended. She entered with the poise of one accustomed to the spotlight, her auburn hair pinned severely, her green eyes flickering with a blend of defiance and unease. Her black dress, though elegant, seemed chosen to deflect attention rather than attract it. Poirot bowed slightly, his courtesy a velvet glove over his probing intent. "Mademoiselle Varnier," he began, his voice smooth as a cello's hum. "You were a rival of Madame Beaumont, n'est-ce pas? Her success, it must have been a shadow upon your own." Elise's lips tightened, but she met his gaze. "Clara was exceptional," she said, her French accent lending her words a clipped precision. "I admired her, Monsieur Poirot, though the critics seldom spared me the comparison. They called her the soul of music, while I was merely its shadow." Her fingers, long and slender, twitched, as if longing for the keys of a piano. "But rivalry does not mean malice. I was rehearsing at the Conservatoire when she died. My accompanist, Monsieur Dubois, can confirm it." Poirot's moustache curved in a faint smile. "The alibi. It is like a perfectly tuned instrument, mademoiselle. It must be tested to ensure it does not falter. Tell me, did you ever speak with Madame Clara about your shared profession? A conversation, perhaps, that revealed her thoughts?" Elise hesitated, her eyes darting to the window. "We spoke occasionally. She was gracious, but distant. Last month, at a recital in Bath, she won a coveted engagement with the Royal Philharmonic. I had hoped for it myself, but I bore her no ill will." Her voice, though steady, carried a note of strain, like a string stretched too taut. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. "Merci, mademoiselle. You may go, but we shall speak again." As Elise departed, her footsteps echoed with the precision of a metronome, and Poirot murmured to Hastings, "Envy. It is a powerful melody, but does it play the tune of murder?" Next entered Mr. Lionel Grayson, Clara's manager, a man whose polished exterior belied a nervous energy. His tailored suit, adorned with gold cufflinks engraved with his initials, spoke of success, but his hands betrayed him, fidgeting with a silk handkerchief. His face, handsome in a conventional way, bore the strain of sleepless nights, and his greying temples suggested a man nearing 50, though he carried himself with the vigour of youth. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot said, gesturing to a chair, "you were the guardian of Madame Beaumont's career, oui? Her triumphs were yours, her failures your burden. Tell me, how was your relationship with her in recent days?" Grayson's smile was practised, a salesman's charm. "Clara was my pride, Monsieur Poirot, a genius, a star. I managed her tours, her contracts, her every triumph. Without me, she'd have been playing in provincial halls, not Saint." His voice faltered slightly, and he dabbed his forehead with the handkerchief. "Her death is a catastrophe. For her, for me, for music." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And yet, monsieur, a star of such magnitude, she might have considered new management, non? A change that would leave you in shadow." Grayson's hand froze mid-dab, his eyes flickering with alarm. "Who told you that?" "It's nonsense. Clara was loyal. We had plans. Paris, Vienna, a world tour. She trusted me implicitly." His voice rose, a touch too loud, and Poirot noted the faint sheen of perspiration on his brow. "Trust, it is a fragile thing," Poirot mused. "You were backstage, were you not, before her performance? Close enough to place a glass of water, perhaps." Grayson's laugh was brittle. "I was busy with sponsors, Monsieur Poirot. I barely saw Clara that night. Ask anyone, Sir Henry, the stagehands. They'll tell you." He stood, smoothing his jacket. "I loved Clara, in my way. I'd never harm her." As Grayson exited, Hastings leaned forward. "Bit of a nervous chap, isn't he? Do you think he's hiding something?" Poirot's fingers tapped a rhythm on the armrest. "He hides much, Hastings, but whether it is guilt or fear, we shall see. The manager, he depends on the star, and when the star threatens to fade, desperation may follow." The final suspect, Mr. Arthur Pennington, shuffled into the room with the air of a man unaccustomed to scrutiny. He was slight, with thinning hair and spectacles that magnified his watery blue eyes. His tweed suit, though clean, was threadbare at the cuffs, and his hands clutched a worn program from one of Clara's past recitals. His devotion to her was evident in the reverent way he held it, as if it were a sacred relic. "Monsieur Pennington," Poirot began, his tone gentle yet piercing, "you were a great admirer of Madame Beaumont. Your presence at her performances. It was constant, oui?" Pennington's cheeks flushed. "She was perfection," he said, his voice trembling with emotion. "Her music, it spoke to me. I attended every recital I could afford. I wrote to her, sent flowers. She inspired me, you see." He paused, adjusting his spectacles. "I was backstage last night, yes, but only to catch a glimpse of her. I'd never dream of hurting her." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "And yet, such devotion, it can become a burden to its object, non? Did Madame Clara ever express discomfort at your attentions?" Pennington's hands shook, and the program crinkled in his grip. "She was kind, always kind. She thanked me for my letters, once at a signing. I only wanted to be near her music." His eyes darted away, and Poirot noted a faint chemical scent clinging to his coat, a detail that stirred his curiosity. "Merci, monsieur," Poirot said, dismissing him. As Pennington left, Poirot turned to Hastings. "Obsession. It is a fire that burns brightly, but dangerous. We must learn more of this man's flames." With the interviews concluded, Poirot and Hastings joined Inspector Japp in the concert hall's backstage area, where the piano remained, a silent witness to the crime. Japp, his notebook open, shared the coroner's preliminary findings. "Poison, likely," he said, scratching his chin. "Something subtle, mixed with her heart medication, perhaps. We're testing the water glass now, but who'd have the chance to slip it in?" Poirot's eyes roamed the stage, lingering on the small table where the glass had stood. "The opportunity. It is narrow, but not impossible. The stagehand, he confirms the glass was placed just before Clara's entrance. The question is, who had access to it in those final moments?" He paused, his mind sifting through the testimonies. Elise, with her alibi, seemed distant from the act, yet her envy was palpable. Grayson, with his access and motive, was a stronger candidate, his nerves betraying a secret. Pennington, though seemingly harmless, had been backstage, his obsession a potential catalyst for madness. Poirot knelt beside the piano, examining the floor for any overlooked detail. His fingers brushed a tiny speck of dust, which he pocketed in a handkerchief for later analysis. "The truth, it hides in the smallest notes," he said to Japp. "We must examine Madame Clara's dressing room, her effects. There will be a clue, a discord in this harmony." The dressing room, a small but elegant space, was a shrine to Clara's artistry. A mirror framed in gold reflected a vase of white roses, their petals wilting slightly. A velvet-lined box held her heart medication, a vial of tiny white pills prescribed for a minor arrhythmia. Beside it lay a locked diary, its leather cover embossed with her initials. The key, however, was missing. Poirot's eyes gleamed, This diary, it will sing to us, Hastings. It holds the thoughts of a woman who knew her danger. Japp, ever practical, called for a locksmith, but Poirot's mind was already elsewhere, piecing together the motives of the trio. Elise, she burns with envy, but her alibi is strong. Grayson, he fears ruin, and his access to Clara's world is intimate. Pennington, his devotion is a shadow that follows too closely. One of them has played a deadly note, and Hercule Poirot shall find it. As they left the concert hall, the fog had thickened, cloaking the Thames in mystery. Hastings, ever loyal, ventured a thought. It's a queer case, Poirot. No weapon, no struggle, just a glass of water and a dead woman. How do you make sense of it? Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Sense, mon ami, is made by order and method. The glass, the diary, the motives, they are the keys of this piano. We shall play them until the melody of truth emerges. He adjusted his hat, his resolve as sharp as the fog was dense. The trio of suspects had each played their part, but only one had composed the final, fatal chord. Chapter 3. The Rival's Motive. The afternoon sun, struggling through the persistent London fog, cast a muted glow over the tea-room of the Ritz, where Hercule Poirot had arranged to meet Mademoiselle Elise Varnier. The setting was one of Poirot's preferred arenas for interrogation, a place of refinement where the clink of porcelain and the murmur of polite conversation could disarm even the most guarded soul. He sat at a corner table, his small frame impeccable in a charcoal suit, his moustache waxed to perfection. Before him, a silver tray bore a pot of Earl Grey, 2 delicate cups, and a plate of scones, arranged with the precision he demanded of all things. Captain Hastings, ever the faithful shadow, sat beside him, his curiosity piqued, but his patience tested by Poirot's insistence on savouring the ritual of tea before their guest arrived. Mademoiselle Varnier, Poirot mused, pouring the tea with a steady hand. She is a woman of talent, yet one who has tasted the bitterness of being second. Envy, Hastings, it is a poison of the heart, and I wish to know if it has spilled into her actions. Hastings, stirring his tea with less finesse, frowned. She seemed genuine enough yesterday, Poirot. Bitter, perhaps, but murderous? I'm not so sure. Her alibi sounds solid. Poirot's eyes twinkled with that familiar blend of amusement and admonition. The alibi, mon cher, is like a beautifully played sonata. It may charm, but it must be examined for flaws. Mademoiselle Varnier's notes, they must be tested. The door of the tea-room swung open, and Elise Varnier entered, her presence as striking as a crescendo in a quiet movement. Her navy coat was tailored to accentuate her slender frame, and her auburn hair was swept into a chignon that spoke of discipline rather than vanity. Her green eyes, sharp and wary, scanned the room before settling on Poirot. She approached with measured steps, her expression a careful mask of composure. "Monsieur Poirot," she said, accepting the offered chair, "I trust this meeting is not to accuse me further. I have already told you all I know." Poirot's smile was disarming, a velvet glove over his probing intent. "Accuse? Non, mademoiselle. I seek only to understand. You and Madame Clara, you shared a stage, a rivalry, perhaps even a dream. Tell me, what was it like to stand in her shadow?" Elise's fingers tightened around the handle of her teacup, though she maintained her poise. Clara was a force, Monsieur Poirot. Her touch on the piano. It was as if the keys themselves obeyed her. I studied at the same conservatoire in Paris, years ago. We were equals then, or so I thought. But the critics, They crowned her the queen, and I—" She paused, her lips pressing into a thin line. "I became the footnote." Poirot leaned forward, his gaze piercing, yet sympathetic. "And this footnote, it must have stung, non? To see her triumph, to read her name in the papers, while yours faded?" Elise's eyes flashed, a spark of fire beneath her restraint. "Of course it stung. Every artist craves recognition. When Clara won the Royal Philharmonic engagement in Bath last month, I felt the weight of it. That opportunity could have revived my career. Instead, I was left to play in smaller halls, to audiences who clapped politely but forgot me by morning." Her voice, though controlled, carried the tremor of suppressed emotion. "But I did not kill her, Monsieur Poirot. Envy is not murder." Poirot nodded, his fingers steepled. "And where were you, mademoiselle, in the hours before Madame Clara's final performance? You mentioned a rehearsal, oui?" "Yes," Elise replied, her tone firm. "I was at the Conservatoire, practicing with Monsieur Dubois, my accompanist. We worked on Liszt's Hungarian Rhapsody No. 2 from 3 until 7 in the evening. The porter saw me leave, and I went straight home. I was not at St. Cecilia's until after Clara's tragedy." Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his mind at work. "This Monsieur Dubois, he is reliable? And the porter, he is precise in his recollection?" Elise's gaze did not waver. "Monsieur Dubois is a professional, and the porter, old Mr. Hargreaves, has known me for years. He keeps a log, if you must check. I was nowhere near Clara's dressing room, or that glass of water." Poirot poured her more tea, a gesture of courtesy that belied his scrutiny. "And yet, mademoiselle, you knew of her habits, her medication, perhaps. You visited her once, backstage, did you not?" Elise's hand paused mid-sip. Yes, a few weeks ago, after a recital. I congratulated her, though it cost me to do so. We spoke briefly about her health. She mentioned her heart condition, a minor thing, she said. I asked about her medication, out of concern, nothing more." Her voice grew defensive. "Surely you don't think I'd use such knowledge to harm her?" Poirot's expression remained inscrutable. "Concern. It is a noble sentiment, but it can mask other intentions. Tell me, did you ever sense that Madame Clara feared someone? A rival, perhaps, or another who coveted her light?" Elise hesitated, her fingers smoothing the edge of her napkin. "Clara was private, but she seemed distracted lately. At the Bath recital, she mentioned feeling watched, as if someone lingered too long in her shadow. I thought it was her nerves. Performers are prone to such fancies. But now—" Her voice trailed off, and she met Poirot's gaze with a flicker of unease. "I don't know, Monsieur Poirot. I only know I played no part in her death." Poirot inclined his head, his courtesy impeccable. "Merci, mademoiselle. Your candor, it is appreciated. We shall speak again, perhaps, when the melody of this mystery becomes clearer." As Elise rose and departed, her steps as precise as a metronome, Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "She's a cool one, Poirot. Bitter, yes, but her story holds together. Do you think she's telling the truth?" Poirot sipped his tea, his eyes half closed in thought. "The truth, Hastings, it is like a delicate arpeggio. It requires the right touch to reveal its harmony. Mademoiselle Varnier, she speaks with conviction, but her envy, it is a discord that lingers. We must verify this rehearsal, this porter's log. The alibi, it must be as solid as she claims." Leaving the Ritz, Poirot and Hastings made their way to the Conservatoire, a stately building of red brick where the air hummed with the faint strains of violins and pianos. Monsieur Dubois, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers, confirmed Elise's account. "She was here, Monsieur Poirot, from 3 to 7. We worked tirelessly on Liszt. She was intense, more so than usual." The porter, Mr. Hargreaves, a stooped figure with a meticulous ledger, corroborated the timeline, showing Poirot the entry, E. Varnier, departed 7:05 p.m. Poirot examined the ledger, his fingers tracing the neat script. "And you are certain, monsieur, of the time? No one could have left earlier, perhaps unnoticed." Hargreaves bristled. "I've kept this log for 20 years, sir. No one slips past me. Mademoiselle Varnier was here, plain as day." Satisfied for the moment, Poirot thanked them and returned to the street, where the fog had begun to lift, revealing the city's sharp edges. Hastings, pulling his coat tighter, ventured a thought. "Her alibi seems watertight, Poirot. If she was here, she couldn't have tampered with Clara's. Water." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Watertight, perhaps, but even the strongest vessel may have a hidden crack. Mademoiselle Varnier knew of Clara's medication, her habits. Envy may not wield the poison itself, but it may inspire another's hand. We must look deeper, Hastings, into the shadows she spoke of." Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot sat by the fire, his eyes fixed on the dancing flames. The rival's motive was clear: envy, a wound to the pride that festered with each of Clara's triumphs. Yet her alibi, supported by witnesses, placed her far from the scene. Was she truly innocent, or had she orchestrated a subtler role in this tragedy? Poirot's grey cells, ever restless, began to weave the threads of Elise's story with those of the other suspects. The manager, Grayson, with his nervous charm, and the fan, Pennington, with his fervent devotion, each played a part in this grim sonata. The question remained: who had struck the fatal note? As the clock struck 6, Poirot rose, adjusting his lapels. "Come, Hastings, the day is not yet done. We must visit the chemist who supplied Madame Clara's medication. The poison, it is the key, and its source will lead us to the truth." The chemist's shop, a narrow establishment on Regent Street, was a haven of order, its shelves lined with bottles and jars labelled in precise script. The elderly pharmacist, Mr. Whittaker, recalled Clara's prescription for her heart condition. A mild dose of digitalis, carefully measured. "She was particular about it," he said, peering over his spectacles. "Always collected it herself, until recently. That manager of hers, Mr. Grayson, picked up her last batch a few days ago. Odd, I thought, but he said she was busy." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And Mademoiselle Varnier, did she ever inquire about poor Madame Clara's medication?" Whittaker frowned, thinking. "Once, perhaps a month ago. She came in, asking about digitalis. Said she was concerned for a friend. I thought it kind, but now you mention it, she seemed awfully curious about the dosage." Poirot thanked him, his mind alight with new possibilities. Elise's interest in Clara's medication, though cloaked in concern, hinted at knowledge that could be dangerous in envious hands. Yet her absence from St. Cecilia's at the critical moment posed a puzzle. Had she acted through another, or was her role merely that of a resentful bystander? As they stepped into the evening, the city's lights piercing the fading fog, Poirot's resolve hardened. "The rival's motive, Hastings, it is clear, but the means, they elude us. We must listen to the silences in her story, for it is there the truth may hide." Chapter 4. The Manager's Secret. The morning mist clung to the cobblestones of Bloomsbury as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to the offices of Lionel Grayson, Madame Clara Beaumont's manager. The building, a narrow Georgian structure, stood with an air of faded grandeur, its brass plaque proclaiming Grayson and Associates, Artistes Management. Inside, the air was heavy with the scent of cigar smoke and old leather, and the walls were adorned with posters of Clara's triumphs, her debut at the Royal Albert Hall, her tour of Vienna, her face radiant in each. Poirot, in his immaculate black suit, his cane tapping softly on the polished floor, surveyed the room with the precision of a conductor before a symphony. Hastings, trailing behind, marvelled at the opulence, though he noted the faint disarray, a stack of papers askew, a coffee stain on the desk, that hinted at a man under strain. "Monsieur Grayson," Poirot began, settling into a leather chair opposite the manager's desk, "you have built a monument to Madame Clara's success, oui? Yet monuments, they can crumble when the foundation is weak. Tell me, what was the foundation of your partnership with her?" Grayson, a man whose polished exterior seemed to fray at the edges, adjusted his gold cufflinks and forced a smile. His greying temples and sharp jawline gave him a distinguished air, but his eyes, darting nervously, betrayed a restless mind. "Clara was my greatest achievement, Monsieur Poirot," he said, his voice smooth but tinged with defensiveness. "I discovered her in a small Parisian salon, barely 20, playing Chopin with a fire that could melt stone. I built her career, booked her tours, negotiated her contracts, made her a star. Without me, she'd still be playing for pennies in Montmartre." Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his skepticism. "And yet, monsieur, such a star. She shines brightly, but she may also cast shadows. There were whispers, were there not, of disagreements, perhaps a desire on Madame Clara's part to seek new management." Grayson's hand froze on his handkerchief, his smile faltering. "Whispers? Idle gossip, Monsieur Poirot. Clara and I were partners, bound by mutual success. She trusted me to manage her affairs, and I did so impeccably." He leaned back, attempting nonchalance, but his fingers drummed a restless rhythm on the desk. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a falcon's, missed nothing. "Impeccably, you say? Yet I have heard of irregularities, monsieur. Funds, perhaps, that were not where they should be. A scandal. It is a dangerous thing for a man in your position, non?" Grayson's face flushed, and he rose, pacing to the window. "You've been listening to slander, Monsieur Poirot. Yes, there were rumours, jealous rivals, disgruntled sponsors. But I assure you, Clara's accounts were in order. I showed her the ledgers myself last month. She was satisfied." His voice, though firm, carried a tremor, and Poirot noted the slight sheen of perspiration on his brow. Hastings, seated quietly, scribbled in his notebook, his brow furrowed. "Sounds like a lot of pressure, managing a star like Clara," he ventured. "Must have been tempting to cut. Corners, eh?" Grayson shot him a look of barely concealed irritation. "I cut no corners, Captain. My reputation is my livelihood. Clara's success was my success. Why would I jeopardize that?" Poirot leaned forward, his voice soft but piercing. "Because, monsieur, a star who threatens to leave her manager, she jeopardizes his livelihood. I have learned that Madame Clara met with Monsieur Henri Duval, a rival manager, only last week. She spoke of new horizons, of freedom. This, it would not please you, non?" Grayson's hand clenched, crumpling his handkerchief. "Duval? That charlatan?" He's been sniffing around my clients for years. Clara mentioned him, yes, but it was nothing serious. She was loyal, I tell you. We had plans. A tour of America, a recording contract. She wouldn't have left me." His voice rose, a note of desperation creeping in, and he turned back to the window, as if seeking refuge in the fog outside. Poirot's fingers steepled, his mind sifting through Grayson's words. "And on the night of her death, monsieur, you were backstage." "Oui? Close to the stage, to the glass of water that carried her doom." Grayson spun around, his eyes wide. "I was with sponsors, Monsieur Poirot. Sir Henry Ashford himself can confirm it. I barely saw Clara that evening. I was arranging her next engagement, ensuring her legacy. You can't think I'd—" He stopped, his breath ragged, and sat heavily, as if the weight of suspicion had buckled his knees. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "What I think, monsieur, is that the truth hides in the details. You collected Madame Clara's medication recently, did you not? An unusual task for a manager, perhaps." Grayson's face paled. "She was busy, rehearsing. I offered to help. It was a simple errand, nothing more. The chemist, Whitaker, can vouch for me." "Indeed," Poirot murmured, rising with a grace that belied his small stature. "We shall speak with Monsieur Whitaker again. For now, merci, Monsieur Grayson. Your cooperation, it is most illuminating." As they left Grayson's office, Hastings glanced at Poirot, his expression a mix of admiration and confusion. "He's a slippery one, Poirot. All that talk of loyalty, but he's sweating like a man with something to hide. Do you think he's our killer?" Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes gleaming with quiet resolve. "He hides, oui, but what? Fear of scandal or guilt of murder? His nerves, they betray him, but we must find the evidence to match. Come, Hastings, to the chemist we go." The chemist's shop on Regent Street was as orderly as Poirot's own mind, its shelves a testament to precision. Mr. Whitaker, the elderly pharmacist, greeted them with a nod, his spectacles glinting in the lamplight. "Monsieur Poirot, back so soon. I trust you're making progress in this dreadful affair." Poirot inclined his head. "Progress, monsieur, is a matter of small steps. You confirmed that Monsieur Grayson collected Madame Clara's digitalis, oui? Tell me, was this a regular occurrence?" Whitaker frowned, consulting his ledger. "No, not regular. Madame Clara usually came herself, every fortnight, like clockwork. But last week, Grayson appeared, said she was indisposed. I thought it odd, but he had her prescription note, all in order. I gave him the vial, 30 pills, as prescribed." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "And this vial, it was untouched, unopened." "As far as I could tell," Whitaker replied. "I sealed them myself, you see. The vial was intact when I handed it over." Poirot thanked him, his mind alight with new threads. Grayson's errand, though seemingly innocent, placed him in possession of Clara's medication, a potential vehicle for poison. Had he tampered with it, or was his involvement mere coincidence? The manager's secret, Poirot sensed, lay not only in his financial dealings, but in his proximity to the tools of death. Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot sat by the fire, his hot chocolate cooling as he pondered. Hastings, ever eager, pressed him. "What's next, Poirot? Grayson's looking guiltier by the minute. That business with the medication. It's suspicious, isn't it?" Poirot's fingers tapped a rhythm on the armrest. "Suspicious, oui, but not conclusive. Monsieur Grayson, he fears a scandal, and his career hangs by a thread. But fear alone does not make a murderer. We must find the poison's path, Hastings, and see if it leads to his door. He rose, his small frame radiating purpose. Tomorrow we visit Monsieur Pennington, the fan. His devotion, it is a melody of its own, and we must listen for its discords. The manager's secret, it is but one note in this symphony. The truth, it waits in the silence. Chapter 5. The fan's devotion. The narrow streets of Camden, shrouded in the early morning haze, seemed to whisper secrets as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings approached the modest flat of Arthur Pennington, the ardent fan of the late Madame Clara Beaumont. The building, a weathered Victorian terrace, stood in stark contrast to the grandeur of Saint. Cecilia's concert hall, its peeling paint and sagging shutters, a testament to a life lived on the fringes of splendor. Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the chill, gripped his cane with a firmness that belied his small stature, his sharp eyes scanning the surroundings for any hint of the man they sought. Hastings, ever the optimist, adjusted his scarf and murmured, "Hard to imagine a chap like Pennington mixed up in murder. Poirot, he seems more the type to worship than to kill." Poirot's moustache curved slightly, a sign of his gentle amusement. "Mon cher Hastings, devotion. It is a flame that can warm or consume. Monsieur Pennington's love for Madame Clara. It burns brightly. But we must see if it has scorched the edges of reason." The door to Pennington's flat creaked open at their knock, revealing a dimly lit hallway, cluttered with stacks of concert programs and faded photographs. Arthur Pennington, a slight man with thinning hair and spectacles that magnified his anxious eyes, greeted them with a nervous nod. His tweed suit, worn but meticulously pressed, hung loosely on his frame, and his hands clutched a dog-eared program from Clara's last recital at the Wigmore Hall. The air carried a faint, acrid scent, chemical, perhaps, like that of a dark-room or a laboratory. "Monsieur Pennington," Poirot began, his voice as smooth as a violin's glissando, "you were a great admirer of Madame Clara, oui? Your presence at her performances, it was a constant note in her symphony. Tell me, what drew you to her music?" Pennington's face lit up, his shyness giving way to fervor. "Her music, Monsieur Poirot, it was divine. When she played, it was as if the heavens opened. I first heard her 3 years ago, Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, and I was lost. I attended every recital I could, saved every shilling for tickets. She was my muse, my reason." His voice trembled, and he adjusted his spectacles, a gesture that seemed more habit than necessity. Poirot settled into a threadbare armchair, his eyes never leaving Pennington's face. "And this devotion, it led you to write to her, to send gifts, perhaps to seek her company." Pennington flushed, his hands tightening on the program. "I wrote letters, yes. I sent flowers. Roses, always white, her favorite. Once at a signing, she thanked me. Her voice, it was like her music, soft but strong. I only wanted to be near her, to feel her genius." His gaze dropped, and Poirot noted the faint tremble in his fingers, as if they held a secret too heavy to bear. "Near her you were," Poirot said, his tone gentle but probing. "On the night of her death, you were backstage at St. Cecilia's, no? Close enough, perhaps, to see her, to touch the glass of water that brought her end." Pennington's head jerked up, his eyes wide with alarm. "Backstage? Yes, but only for a moment. I bribed a stagehand, a shilling, nothing more, to let me stand in the wings. I wanted to see her before she played, to wish her well in my heart. But I didn't touch anything, I swear. I'd never harm her. She was everything to me." His voice cracked, and he buried his face in his hands, the program crumpling in his grip. Hastings, standing by the window, raised an eyebrow. Bit intense, isn't he, Poirot? All that talk of muses and heavens sounds like he was obsessed. Poirot's gaze remained fixed on Pennington, his mind sifting through the man's words. Obsession, mon ami. It is a melody that can drown out reason. Monsieur Pennington, tell me, did Madame Clara ever respond to your letters? Did she ever express discomfort at your attentions? Pennington looked up, his eyes glistening. She was kind, always kind. She answered one letter, a brief note thanking me for my support. I kept it, framed it. He gestured to a small table where a glass frame held a single sheet of paper, Clara's elegant script visible even from a distance. Discomfort? No, never. She understood, I think, that I only wanted to honor her. Poirot rose, crossing to the table to examine the letter. The words were polite, formulaic, the sort an artist might send to a devoted fan. Yet Clara's diary had hinted at a persistent shadow, and Poirot wondered if Pennington's devotion had crossed into intrusion. "And your hobbies, monsieur," he said, turning back to Pennington. "They include photography, perhaps." I detect a chemical scent, one not unfamiliar to those who work with developing solutions. Pennington blinked, startled. Photography? Yes, a little. I take pictures of concert halls, of programs, to remember her performances. It's harmless, Monsieur Poirot. I keep a small darkroom in the cellar. His voice faltered, and he adjusted his spectacles again, a nervous tic that Poirot noted with interest. Harmless, oui, Poirot murmured, his eyes scanning the room. The walls were a shrine to Clara, photographs of her at the piano, clippings of reviews, a lock of auburn hair in a glass case, acquired, Pennington admitted, at a charity auction. The devotion was palpable, but so was the intensity, a fervor that could tip into madness. And these chemicals, they are safe, non? Nothing that could be misused? Pennington's face paled. Misused? No, I only use what's needed for developing. Silver nitrate, developer, fixer. Nothing dangerous, nothing like poison. His voice shook, and he looked away, his hands twisting the program into a crumpled mess. Poirot's smile was enigmatic, his mind alight with possibilities. Merci, monsieur. Your passion, it is clear, but passion, it can blind. We shall speak again, perhaps, when the notes of this mystery align. As they left the flat, Hastings shook his head. He's a queer sort, Poirot. All that talk of muses and framed letters. Do you think he's capable of murder? Poirot adjusted his gloves, his eyes gleaming in the morning light. Capable, Hastings? The heart, when consumed by devotion, can act in ways the mind does not foresee. Monsieur Pennington, he knows chemicals, he was backstage, and his love, it is a fire that burns too brightly. But we must find the spark. Did his devotion turn to despair, or is he merely a spectator in this tragedy? Their next stop was Scotland Yard, where Inspector Japp awaited, with the latest from the coroner. The poison, he confirmed, was a rare alkaloid, likely derived from a plant source, its effects amplified when combined with Clara's digitalis. It's clever, Poirot, Japp said, tapping his pencil on his desk. No taste, no smell, and it mimics a heart attack. Whoever did this knew exactly what they were doing. Poirot's fingers steepled, his mind racing. And the glass, mon ami. The water that carried this poison. Clean "Except for traces of the alkaloid," Japp replied. "The stagehand swears it was fresh, poured from a pitcher kept backstage. Only a few had access. Stagehands, Clara's dresser, and, well, anyone who slipped into the wings, like Pennington." Poirot nodded, his thoughts returning to the chemical scent in Pennington's flat. Silver nitrate, developer. These were not poisons, but they spoke of a man familiar with substances that could be manipulated. Had Pennington's obsession driven him to study Clara's medication, to find a way to end her life while preserving her as an eternal muse? Or was he, as he claimed, merely a worshipper at her altar? Back at Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot sat by the fire, his hot chocolate a ritual of reflection. Hastings, pacing, ventured a thought. Pennington's odd, Poirot. But poison? It's so calculated. I'd have thought his type would be more impulsive. Poirot's eyes half closed, his voice soft. Calculation, Hastings, can wear the mask of passion. Monsieur Pennington he adores, but adoration can twist into possession. We must learn more of his movements, his chemicals. The fan's devotion, it is a note in our symphony. But is it the crescendo of murder? He rose, his resolve as sharp as the winter air. Tomorrow, we unlock Madame Clara's diary. Its pages, they will sing of her fears, her suspicions. The truth, it hides in the silences, and Hercule Poirot shall make them speak. Chapter 6. The Diary's Clue. The late morning light filtered through the tall windows of Whitehaven Mansions, casting a soft glow over Hercule Poirot's pristine sitting room. The air was scented with the faint aroma of his morning hot chocolate, served in a porcelain cup that matched the meticulous order of his surroundings. Poirot, dressed in a perfectly tailored grey suit, sat at his mahogany desk, his small hands poised over a leather-bound diary. The locked treasure of Madame Clara Beaumont, retrieved from her dressing-room at St. Cecilia's Concert Hall. The key, missing at the scene, had been found by Inspector Japp's diligent constables tucked beneath a loose floorboard in the backstage corridor, a discovery that piqued Poirot's curiosity. Captain Hastings, ever eager, hovered nearby, his eyes fixed on the diary as if it might spring to life and confess its secrets. "Poirot," Hastings ventured, his voice tinged with impatience, "that diary's bound to tell us something. Clara must have known someone was after her. Why else hide the key?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a sign of his quiet amusement at his friend's enthusiasm. "Patience, mon cher Hastings. The diary, it is like a score of music. Its notes must be read with care to hear the melody of truth. Madame Clara, she was a woman of precision, and her words, they will reveal what her silence could not." With a delicate touch, Poirot turned the key in the lock. The mechanism, yielding with a soft click. The diary's pages, edged in gold, were filled with Clara's elegant script, a testament to her disciplined nature. The entries chronicled her performances, her thoughts on music, and, increasingly, her private fears. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a conductor's baton, scanned the text, pausing at passages that hinted at a shadow over her brilliance. "Listen, Hastings," Poirot said, his voice low and deliberate as he read aloud. "October 12th. Another letter from AP today. His words are kind, but they cling like damp air. I see him in the wings sometimes, watching. I must speak to Lionel about keeping him at a distance." Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowed. "AP, that's Pennington, surely. The fan. Sounds like he was making her uneasy." Poirot nodded, turning the page. "Indeed, mon ami. But there is more. Listen, October 20th. Lionel is distracted, evasive. I questioned him about the accounts, and he grew pale. I fear he has not been honest. If I leave him, what will become of my career? Yet I cannot trust him." Hastings let out a low whistle. Grayson, too. She suspected her own manager of fiddling the books. That's motive, Poirot. If she was planning to sack him, he'd have been desperate. Poirot's fingers traced the script, his mind sifting through the implications. He read on, his voice steady. "November 1st. My medication feels strange. The pills, they taste bitter, not as before. I spoke to Whittaker, but he insists the prescription is unchanged. Could someone be tampering? I must be cautious." Hastings' eyes widened. Tampering with her pills? That's it, Poirot. The poison. It must have been in her medication, not just the water. But who had access? Poirot closed the diary, his expression grave. "The question, Hastings, is one of intimacy. The pills, they were kept in her dressing room, a place few could enter. Monsieur Grayson, he collected them from the chemist. Mademoiselle Varnier, she inquired about them. And Monsieur Pennington, he was backstage, close enough to slip into shadows unnoticed. He rose, pacing the room with measured steps, his cane tapping softly on the polished floor. But there is another note, Hastings, one that resonates. The final entry, dated the night of her death. Tonight, I confront the truth. I know who watches me, who threatens me. I will not be silent." Hastings gasped. She knew her killer, Poirot. She was going to confront them, and they silenced her first. Poirot's eyes gleamed, his grey cells weaving the threads of the diary's revelations. Oui, mon ami. Madame Clara, she was no victim of chance. She saw the danger, and she prepared to face it. This confrontation, it was her final act, and it cost her life. Leaving Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot and Hastings made their way to Scotland Yard, where Inspector Japp awaited with the latest forensic findings. The coroner's report, now more detailed, confirmed the poison as a rare alkaloid, likely aconitine, derived from the monk's hood plant. Its potency, when combined with Clara's digitalis, had caused her heart to falter, mimicking a natural collapse. "Clever stuff," Japp said, rubbing his chin. "You'd need to know your chemistry to pull this off, and access to her pills or that water glass." Poirot nodded, his mind returning to the diary's clues. "The pills, Inspector. They are a private matter, kept close to Madame Clara. The water, it was public, placed on the stage. The killer, they chose a method both intimate and bold. We must search her dressing room again, for the vial of pills may hold more secrets." At St. Cecilia's, the dressing room remained untouched, preserved by Japp's orders. The velvet-lined box containing Clara's medication sat on the dressing table, its contents undisturbed since the night of her death. Poirot examined the vial, noting the seal was intact, but the pills within appeared uneven, some slightly discoloured. "Curieux," he murmured, holding one to the light. "These, they are not uniform. A chemist's eye, it is needed." He summoned Mr. Whittaker, the pharmacist, who arrived promptly, his elderly frame stooped, but his mind sharp. Examining the pills, Whittaker frowned. "These are my work, Monsieur Poirot. But some look tampered with. The coating, it's uneven, as if someone crushed and reformed them. I'd swear they left my shop perfect." Poirot's moustache twitched. "And who, monsieur, could tamper so subtly? Someone with skill, with knowledge of chemicals, perhaps?" Whittaker hesitated. "It's delicate work. You'd need a steady hand, a mortar and pestle, and the right substance. Aconitine, you say. It's rare, not something you'd find in a common shop." As Whittaker departed, Poirot turned to Japp and Hastings. The diary. It speaks of a shadow, of tampering, of confrontation. Madame Clara. She suspected one of our trio. Grayson, with his access to her pills. Varnier, with her knowledge of the dosage. Or Pennington, with his chemical hobbies. But which one acted? Hastings scratched his head. Pennington's the odd one out, isn't he? Grayson and Varnier had clear motives, money, envy. But Pennington, he loved her. Why kill her? Poirot's eyes narrowed, his voice soft but firm. Love, Hastings. It can be a poison as deadly as aconitine. If Monsieur Pennington felt his muse slipping away, if she rejected his devotion, he may have sought to preserve her forever in death. But we need proof, not passion. They returned to the stage, where the grand piano stood silent, a monument to Clara's final moments. Poirot knelt beside the small table, examining the spot where the glass had rested. A faint ring of moisture remained, and beneath it a tiny speck of powder, almost invisible. He collected it in a handkerchief, his movements precise. This, it may be nothing, or it may be. The final note of our symphony, he said, tucking it away. As they left the concert hall, the London dusk settled over the city, the gaslights casting long shadows. Hastings, ever hopeful, pressed Poirot. That diary, Poirot, it's a gold mine. Clara knew something, and it got her killed. Are we closing in? Poirot adjusted his hat, his eyes gleaming with quiet resolve. We are close, mon ami. But the truth, it is like a delicate chord. It must be struck with precision. The diary, it has given us her voice. Now we must listen to the silences of our suspects, for one of them has played the fatal note. Chapter 7. The Poison's Path. The fog had lifted from London's streets, leaving a crisp clarity to the morning, as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings made their way to the laboratory of Dr. Mortimer Langston, a forensic chemist renowned for his precision in matters of toxicology. The laboratory, tucked away in a quiet corner of Bloomsbury, was a sanctuary of science, its air sharp with the tang of the chemicals and the hum of meticulous inquiry. Poirot, his overcoat draped over his arm, moved with the deliberate grace of a man who saw order in chaos, his cane tapping softly on the linoleum floor. Hastings, ever the foil, adjusted his hat and muttered, "This place gives me the shivers, Poirot. All these bottles and burners feels like a witch's lair." Poirot's moustache curved in a faint smile. "No, mon cher Hastings, it is a temple of truth, the poison that silenced Madame Clara. It will speak to us here, through the language of science." Dr. Langston, a wiry man with spectacles perched on a hawkish nose, greeted them with a nod, his hands already gloved as he prepared to analyze the speck of powder Poirot had collected from the stage at St. Cecilia's. The coroner's report had identified the poison as aconitine, a rare alkaloid, but its source and delivery remained a puzzle. Poirot, his eyes gleaming with anticipation, handed over the handkerchief containing the powder. "This, doctor, may be the final note in our melody. Tell me, what does it sing?" Langston examined the speck under a microscope, his movements precise. "Aconitine is a devilish choice," he said, his voice clipped with professional detachment. "Colorless, tasteless, and deadly in minute quantities. When combined with digitalis, as Madame Beaumont was taking, it triggers a heart arrhythmia that mimics natural failure. Whoever used it knew her medical condition intimately." Poirot's fingers steepled, his mind weaving the threads of evidence. "And this powder, it is aconitine?" Langston nodded, adjusting the microscope. Preliminary tests suggest so. It's consistent with the residue found in the glass of water. But here's the curious part. Aconitine isn't easily obtained. It's derived from monkshood, a plant not commonly sold. You'd need access to a botanical supplier or a private garden. Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowed. A garden? That sounds like something a chemist might know about, or someone with a hobby like Pennington's photography. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Oui, Hastings, but let us not leap to the crescendo. The poison's path. It begins with knowledge and ends with opportunity. We must trace it backward. Their next stop was the chemist's shop on Regent Street, where Mr. Whittaker, the elderly pharmacist, awaited. His ledger, a model of order, lay open on the counter, and his spectacles glinted as he greeted them. Monsieur Poirot, I've been expecting you. This business with Madame Clara, it's shaken us all. Poirot inclined his head, his voice smooth but probing. Monsieur Whittaker, you have been most helpful, but I must ask again about the digitalis. Monsieur Grayson collected her last vial, oui? And Mademoiselle Varnier, she inquired about the dosage. Tell me, did anyone else show interest in Madame Clara's medication? Whittaker frowned, consulting his ledger. No one else, not directly, but I recall something odd. A young man, nervous sort, came in a month ago, asking about heart medications in general. Said he was researching for a friend. I didn't think much of it, but he was awfully specific about digitalis interactions. I didn't catch his name. Glasses, thin, a bit twitchy. Hastings glanced at Poirot. Sounds like Pennington, doesn't it? Poirot's moustache twitched. Perhaps, Hastings, but we must not assume. Monsieur Whittaker, this man, did he mention Madame Clara? Not by name, Whittaker replied, but he asked about side effects of digitalis with other substances. I warned him it could be dangerous if mixed improperly. He thanked me and left. Poirot thanked the pharmacist and stepped into the street, where the midday bustle of London contrasted with the quiet intensity of his thoughts. The poison's path, Hastings, it is a narrow one. Monsieur Grayson had the vial, Mademoiselle Varnier knew the dosage, and Monsieur Pennington, he may have sought the knowledge to combine them. But who acted? Their final stop was a botanical supplier in Covent Garden, a shop fragrant with the scent of herbs and earth. The proprietor, a stout woman named Mrs. Hargrove, confirmed that monkshood was rare, but available to select clients. It's a dangerous plant, she said, wiping her hands on her apron. We only sell it to licensed buyers, chemists, researchers, that sort. I've not sold any recently, but I did have a gentleman inquire about it 2 months ago. Said he was a hobbyist, studying plants for photography or some such. Poirot's eyes gleamed. This gentleman, he was thin, with spectacles perhaps. Mrs. Hargrove nodded. That's him. Didn't give a name, paid in cash. Asked about extracting alkaloids, which I found odd. I told him it was beyond my expertise and sent him to a library. As they left the shop, Hastings shook his head. Pennington again. Poirot. He's got the knowledge, the chemicals, and he was backstage. It's starting to add up. Poirot adjusted his gloves, his expression enigmatic. It adds, Hastings, but it does not yet sing. The poison, it requires not only knowledge, but opportunity. Monsieur Grayson, he had the pills. Mademoiselle Varnier, she had the motive. Monsieur Pennington, he had the obsession. We must find the moment when their paths converged with Madame Clara's. Back at Scotland Yard, Japp shared the latest findings. The stagehand, a lad named Tommy, confirmed that the water pitcher backstage was accessible to anyone in the wings. Grayson, Pennington, even Varnier, had she been there. But the pills, Japp added, they're the key. The coroner says the aconitine could have been mixed into them, not just the water. Someone got to that vial. Poirot's mind raced, the diary's words echoing. My medication feels strange. Clara had suspected tampering, and Grayson's access to the vial made him a prime suspect. Yet Pennington's chemical inquiries and Varnier's knowledge of the dosage could not be ignored. The poison's path, Poirot murmured. It is a delicate thread, woven through trust and betrayal. We must follow it to its source. At Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot sat by the fire, his hot chocolate a ritual of reflection. Hastings, pacing, ventured a thought. It's Grayson, isn't it? He had the pills, the motive, the access. Pennington's odd, but he's too devoted to kill her. And Varnier's alibi holds. Poirot's eyes half closed, his voice soft. Motive, opportunity, knowledge. They are the chords of this crime, Hastings. Monsieur Grayson, he fears ruin. Mademoiselle Varnier, she burns with envy. Monsieur Pennington, his love is a fire that may consume. The diary tells us Clara knew her enemy. Tomorrow we confront them all, and the truth, it shall play its final note. Chapter 8. The Confrontation. The grand auditorium of St. Cecilia's Concert Hall, bathed in the soft glow of its chandeliers, stood silent save for the faint echo of footsteps on its polished stage. Hercule Poirot had chosen this hallowed ground for the final act of his investigation, a setting as dramatic as the crime itself. The piano, where Madame Clara Beaumont had met her tragic end, gleamed under the spotlight, a mute witness to the truth he was about to unveil. Poirot, his small frame commanding despite its diminutive size, stood center stage, his black suit immaculate, his moustache a perfect crescent of resolve. Captain Hastings, seated in the front row beside Inspector Japp, shifted restlessly, his eyes fixed on the three suspects gathered before Poirot: Elise Varnier, Lionel Grayson, and Arthur Pennington. The air was thick with tension, the suspects' faces a study in contrasts, Elise's sharp features set in defiance, Grayson's polished charm fraying at the edges, Pennington's nervous gaze darting behind his spectacles. Poirot, with the theatrical flair of a maestro, raised a hand, silencing the murmurs of the small audience, which included Sir Henry Ashford and a few stagehands summoned as witnesses. Mesdames et messieurs, Poirot began, his voice resonant yet precise, we are gathered in this place of music to resolve a discord most foul, the murder of Madame Clara Beaumont. She, who brought harmony to our hearts, was silenced by a poison, aconitine, administered with cunning precision. Tonight, Hercule Poirot shall reveal the hand that played this fatal note. Elise Varnier straightened, her green eyes flashing. I've told you, Monsieur Poirot, I was at the Conservatoire. I had no part in this. Grayson, his cufflinks glinting as he fidgeted, added, Nor I. My reputation is at stake, but I'd never harm Clara. She was my livelihood. Pennington, clutching a crumpled programme, stammered, I loved her, Monsieur Poirot. I could never. Poirot raised a hand, his gaze piercing. Silence, s'il vous plaît. The truth, it does not hide in protestations, but in the order of facts. Let us reconstruct the melody of Madame Clara's final moments. He paced before the piano, his cane tapping a deliberate rhythm. Madame Clara. She died of aconitine, a poison that amplified her digitalis, causing her heart to falter. The coroner confirms it was in the water she drank, but her diary, her voice from beyond, speaks of tempered pills. She wrote of a bitter taste, of suspicion. She knew her killer, and she planned to confront them that night. He turned to Elise, his eyes like polished steel. Mademoiselle Varnier, your envy was a fire that burned brightly. Madame Clara's triumphs cast you into shadow, and you knew of her medication, having inquired at the chemist's. Yet, your alibi, it is strong, confirmed by Monsieur Dubois and the porter's log. You were not at Saint Cecilia's when the poison was placed. Your motive, it sings, but your opportunity, it is silent. Elise's lips tightened, but she said nothing, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Poirot pivoted to Pennington, whose spectacles glinted with nervous sweat. Monsieur Pennington, your devotion was a flame that consumed you. You were backstage, close enough to see the glass, to know her habits. Your inquiries about digitalis, your chemical knowledge, they suggest a mind capable of crafting poison. But your love, it was pure none. To kill her would be to destroy your muse, or perhaps you sought to preserve her forever in death. Pennington's voice broke. No, I'd never hurt her. I only wanted to be near her music, her light. Poirot's gaze softened, but only for a moment, before he turned to Grayson, whose polished facade was cracking. And you, Monsieur Grayson, you had the most to lose. Madame Clara, she planned to leave you for Monsieur Duval, threatening your career, your reputation. A scandal loomed, whispers of mismanaged funds. You collected her medication, you were backstage, and in your office we found a vial, cleverly disguised as cologne containing traces of aconitine. Grayson leapt to his feet, his face ashen. That's preposterous. I'm no chemist. That vial, it's a mistake, a plant. I was with sponsors. Sir Henry can confirm. Sir Henry, from the audience, nodded reluctantly. He was with me, Poirot, until just before the performance, but he did step away briefly. Poirot's smile was enigmatic. Briefly, oui, but long enough. The stagehand, Tommy, saw you near the water pitcher, Monsieur Grayson. You poured the glass yourself, claiming it was for Clara's comfort. But you laced it with aconitine, knowing her digitalis would amplify its effect. The tampered pills, they were a precaution, but the water, it was your masterstroke. Grayson's hands shook, his handkerchief a crumpled ruin. You've no proof. This is conjecture, Poirot. Poirot stepped closer, his voice low but unyielding. The proof, it is in the details. The speck of powder on the stage, it matches the aconitine in your vial. The diary, it speaks of your evasion, your fear of her departure. You acted to silence her before she could expose your misdeeds. The scandal, it would have ruined you, non? Grayson collapsed into his chair, his face buried in his hands. A sob escaped him, and then, in a broken whisper, he confessed, I couldn't let her leave. She was going to tell everyone. Duval, the papers. I'd be finished, disgraced. The aconitine. I got it from a contact, a botanist. I thought it would be untraceable, just a heart attack. I didn't want to kill her, only to stop her. Japp, rising with a grim nod, signalled his constables. That's enough, Grayson. You're under arrest. As Grayson was led away, his shoulders slumped, Poirot turned to the others. Mademoiselle Varnier, your envy was a shadow, but it did not cast the fatal blow. Monsieur Pennington, your devotion was a fire, but it burned only you. The truth, it has played its final chord. Elise stood, her eyes glistening, but her voice steady. I hated her success, Monsieur Poirot. but I'm glad it wasn't me. Pennington, trembling, clutched his program. I'll never hear her music again, he whispered, a tear falling. Poirot adjusted his hat, his expression serene. The music, it lives in memory, but justice, it restores order. The silent pianist, she has spoken. As the suspects departed, Hastings clapped Poirot on the shoulder. Brilliant, Poirot. You had Grayson pegged from the start, didn't you? Poirot's eyes twinkled. Not from the start, mon ami. But the grey cells, they listen, they arrange, and they find the harmony in chaos. Now, let us leave this stage for a quieter one. Perhaps with a hot chocolate, non? Chapter 9. The Resolution. The soft glow of gas lights illuminated the streets of London as Hercule Poirot and Captain Hastings emerged from St. Cecilia's concert hall, the echoes of Lionel Grayson's confession still resonating in the air. The fog, ever a faithful companion to the city's secrets, had settled once more, casting a veil over the cobblestones and lending an air of solemnity to the night. Poirot, his small frame wrapped in a neatly tailored overcoat, adjusted his hat with a precision that mirrored his thoughts. His cane tapped a steady rhythm, a counterpoint to the turmoil of the case now resolved. Hastings, walking beside him, exhaled a plume of breath into the chilly air, his face a mixture of relief and awe. "By Jove, Poirot," Hastings said, his voice tinged with admiration. "You played that like a maestro. Grayson didn't stand a chance once you laid out the evidence. But how did you know it was him, right from the start?" Poirot's moustache twitched, a subtle sign of his amusement. "Not from the start, mon cher Hastings. The grey cells, they do not leap to conclusions. They dance, they arrange, they seek the order beneath the chaos. Monsieur Grayson, he betrayed himself with his nerves, his access, his fear of ruin. But it was Madame Clara's diary, her voice, that pointed the way." They paused at a corner, the distant hum of a hansom cab breaking the silence. Poirot's eyes, sharp as ever, gazed into the fog, as if seeing the threads of the case woven anew. "The resolution, Hastings. It is not merely the capture of the guilty. It is the restoration of harmony, the silencing of discord. Madame Clara, she deserved justice. And now she has it." Their steps led them to Scotland Yard, where Inspector Japp awaited to finalize the paperwork of Grayson's arrest. The office, cluttered with files and the faint scent of ink, was a stark contrast to the elegance of St. Cecilia's, yet it was here that the case's final notes would be played. Japp, his round face flushed with the satisfaction of a closed case, greeted them with a nod. "You've done it again, Poirot," he said, scribbling a signature. "Grayson singing like a canary now. Full confession. Details of how he got the aconitine from a shady botanist in Whitechapel. We're rounding up the supplier as we speak." Poirot inclined his head, his expression serene. "Bon, Inspector. The poison's path, it is clear now. But tell me, what of Mademoiselle Varnier and Monsieur Pennington? They, too, must find their way forward." Japp shrugged, flipping his notebook shut. "Varnier's back at the conservatoire, practicing like her life depends on it. Says she'll dedicate her next recital to Clara. Pennington's a mess, been seen wandering near the concert hall, clutching his programs. I've got a constable keeping an eye on him, make sure he doesn't do anything daft." Poirot's gaze softened, a rare flicker of compassion crossing his features. "The heart, it heals slowly, Inspector. Their motives, envy, obsession, they were shadows, but not the darkness that killed." must ensure they find light again. Leaving Scotland Yard, Poirot and Hastings made their way to a small café on the Strand, a haven of warmth against the evening's chill. Over a pot of tea for Hastings and a hot chocolate for Poirot, served with the precision he demanded, they reflected on the case. The café's windows steamed with the heat of conversation, and Poirot's small hands cradled his cup as he spoke. "Mademoiselle Varnier," he began. Her envy was a wound, deep and raw. Yet she channeled it into her music, not murder. In her, I see a spark that may yet shine if she learns to forgive herself for her bitterness. Hastings nodded, stirring his tea. "And Pennington?" "Poor chap's devotion was almost pitiful. Do you think he'll be all right?" Poirot's eyes half closed, his voice soft. "Monsieur Pennington. His love was a fire that burned too fiercely. He must learn to let go, to find beauty in other melodies. I have suggested to Sir Henry that he be offered support, perhaps a place in the concert hall staff, where music can heal him." Hastings leaned back, his admiration plain. "You think of everything, Poirot. Not just the crime, but the people left behind. It's what sets you apart, you know." Poirot's smile was modest, though his eyes gleamed with quiet pride. "The crime, Hastings, it is a puzzle. But the people, they are the heart. To resolve a murder, one must understand not only the act, but the souls it touches. Madame Clara, she was the center of their world, rival, star, muse. Her death, it was a discord. But her justice, it is a chord of peace." As they finished their drinks, the café's pianist struck up a gentle rendition of Chopin's Nocturne in E-flat major, the same piece Pennington had cited as his first encounter with Clara's genius. Poirot listened, his head tilted slightly, as if hearing her voice in the notes. "She plays still, Hastings," he murmured, "in the music, in the truth. She lives." They stepped into the night, the fog swirling around them like a final curtain. The case of the silent pianist was closed, its resolution a testament to Poirot's unerring pursuit of truth. Yet, as they walked toward Whitehaven Mansions, Poirot's thoughts lingered on the human cost, the envy that scarred, the devotion that consumed, the greed that destroyed. "The heart, it is a fragile instrument," he said softly, "but with order and method, we mend its broken strings." Chapter 10. The final note. The fire in Hercule Poirot's sitting room at Whitehaven Mansions crackled softly, casting a warm glow over the polished mahogany furniture and the meticulously arranged ornaments that adorned his shelves. The London evening, cloaked in a gentle mist, pressed against the windows, its quiet presence a fitting backdrop to the resolution of the case of Madame Clara Beaumont. Poirot, seated in his favorite armchair, sipped a steaming cup of hot chocolate, its rich aroma mingling with the faint scent of beeswax from the polished surfaces. His small hands, ever precise, cradled the porcelain cup, and his moustache, immaculately groomed, twitched with the satisfaction of a puzzle solved. Captain Hastings, sprawled in a less formal posture across from him, nursed a glass of brandy, his face alight with the afterglow of Poirot's triumph. "What a case, Poirot," Hastings said, his voice warm with admiration. "You unravelled it like a piece of music, picking out every note until the whole tune came clear. Grayson's confession, well, it was like the final chord of a symphony." Poirot's eyes, sharp and reflective, glinted in the firelight. "A symphony, oui, mon cher Hastings, but one with many dissonances. The murder of Madame Clara. It was not merely a crime of greed, but a tragedy of human frailties, envy, obsession, fear. Each played its part, but only one struck the fatal blow. He set his cup down, his movements deliberate, and leaned back, his fingers steepled in thought. Madame Clara, she was a star, a beacon of artistry. Her music stirred the soul, yet it also stirred the darker passions of those around her. Mademoiselle Varnier, her rival, burned with the pain of being second. Monsieur Pennington, her devotee, loved with a fire that bordered on madness, and Monsieur Grayson, her manager, feared the ruin of his empire. It was Grayson who could not bear the loss of his star, who chose poison to preserve his own light. Hastings nodded, swirling his brandy. That diary of hers, it was the key, wasn't it? The way she wrote about her suspicions, her plans to confront someone. It practically pointed straight to Grayson. Poirot's smile was subtle, a maestro acknowledging a well-played note. The diary, Hastings. It was her voice, preserved in ink. It spoke of tampered pills, of a shadow that watched, of a truth she meant to face. But it was the details, the speck of aconitine on the stage, the vial in Grayson's office, the nervous tremor in his voice that composed the melody of guilt. The grey cells, they arranged these notes into harmony. He rose, crossing to the window, where the mist swirled like a silent overture. Consider, Hastings, the elegance of the crime. Aconitine, so subtle, so precise, mixed with her digitalis to mimic a natural death. Grayson, he knew her habits, her medication, her trust in that glass of water. He acted not from hatred, but from desperation, a man clinging to the wreckage of his ambition. Hastings leaned forward, his brow furrowed. But what about Varnier and Pennington? They had their motives too. I half expected Pennington to crack under all that devotion of his. Poirot turned, his eyes softening with a rare compassion. Mademoiselle Varnier, her envy was a wound, but she poured it into her music, not murder. She will play again, perhaps with a new humility, honoring Madame Clara's memory. Monsieur Pennington, his love was a fire that nearly consumed him, but it was not the flame of violence. He will heal, in time, with guidance, perhaps through music, which was his solace. He returned to his chair, his voice low and reflective. The human heart, Hastings, it is a complex instrument. It plays melodies of joy, of sorrow, of greed. Madame Clara, she understood this, and her music gave it voice. Her death, it was a discord, but her justice, it restores the balance. Hastings raised his glass, a grin breaking through. To justice, then, and to you, Poirot. You've done it again, made sense of the senseless. Poirot's moustache curved in a modest smile. Not I, mon ami, but order and method. They are the keys to every mystery, the rhythm that underlies the chaos. The case of the silent pianist, it is closed, but its echoes, they linger in the heart. As the fire burned low, Poirot sipped his hot chocolate, his thoughts drifting to the piano that stood silent at St. Cecilia's. In his mind, he heard Clara's music, a nocturne that spoke of beauty and loss. The final note, he murmured. It is not the end, but the beginning of memory.